COVID-19 cases in Sri Lanka increase. Employee at an apparel factory in Kahatudua tests positive. 5,000 rupees for families in Gampaha affected by quarantine. Search for Rishad enters day 5. Government seeks public opinion to draft a new constitution. Letter highlighting flaws in the 20th Amendment handed over to the Mahanayakas of the Malwatu and Askiri chapters. Sri Lankan short film Vikari wins big at LA Scream Fest.
Good evening, you're watching Primetime News on TV1. On to your top story in the bulletin. The Ministry of Justice has called on the general public to express their ideas and views with regards to the drafting of the new constitution.
In a release, the Ministry of Justice states that any member of the public who wishes to submit a proposal on the new constitution can send their submissions to the secretary of the expert committee appointed to draft the new constitution. These proposals can be submitted in Sinhala, Tamil or English. Submissions can be made under 12 topics: the nature of the state, fundamental rights and language, directive principles of state policy, the executive, the legislature, franchise and elections including referendum, decentralization, devolution of power and power sharing, the judiciary, public finance, public security, any other areas of interest that is not referred above. All proposals must be submitted on or before the 30th of November. The release also adds that the committee would appreciate it if the submissions are made as concisely as possible. Your submissions can be sent via email to expertscompublic@yahoo.com or by registered post to room number 32, block 2, BMICH, Bauddha Lokamawata, Colombo 7.
Taking a look at today's COVID-19 assessment, 22 new COVID-19 patients linked to the Minuangoda cluster were identified today. According to the Government Information Department, the Minuangoda cluster now has a total of 2,036 patients. All 22 COVID-19 cases were close contacts of the employee at the factory in Dulapitiya. Now this brings the total number of COVID-19 patients in Sri Lanka to 5,497.
How did COVID-19 spread to Kuliapitiya? PCR tests are carried out on individuals infected with the flu who arrived at the OPD for medical assistance. The individual who tested positive for the virus had no history of transmission. There has been a patient in our area with no pathway of transmission. Thereafter, we found out that this COVID-19 positive individual had attended a wedding and a church service. Targeting those two locations, we carried out PCR tests on the bride and the groom tested positive for the virus. Subsequently, another close associate of the couple who had attended the wedding also tested positive for the virus. We are still in the process of identifying the first level contacts.
53 staff members, including 14 doctors attached to the Kuliapitiya hospital, have been subjected to quarantine after a woman who was receiving treatment at the hospital tested positive for the virus. Director of the hospital, Dr. Prabhat Veerawatha, said the woman who tested positive for the virus has been transferred to the IDH hospital in Colombo. He urged locals to refrain from visiting the hospital unless for essential medical services. Meanwhile, Kuliapitiya Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Utpala Gunasekara, stated that travel restrictions were imposed on 2 villages in the Kuliapitiya area today.
The problem is that besides the Brandix cluster, there are a number of other patients outside that cluster. We can't trace the source of the virus for these patients. The police, the Triforces and the intelligence units are working hard to find the close contacts of all of these patients. We have restricted movement in areas such as Udupitiya and Gayala.
Infected person at a leading garment factory in Kahatudua.
A nurse employed at a garment factory in Kahatudua area has tested positive for COVID-19. The individual had attended a wedding in Minuangoda where a COVID-19 infected individual had been present. The medical officer of health in Kahatudua, Danuka Patirata, said close contacts and associates of the nurse has been directed for PCR testing.
Were COVID-19 cases identified in Polonnaruwa?
49 staff members, including 11 doctors and 18 nurses at the Polonnaruwa General Hospital have been directed to quarantine after a patient at the hospital tested positive for COVID-19. Hospital Director Dr. Sampath Indigokumara said that the patient had been receiving treatment at the hospital for 5 days. The director of the hospital said that the infected individual had visited a local ophthalmology institute in the Minuangode area on the 1st of this month. According to the director, the patient had not disclosed this information to the hospital upon admission. Hospital Director Dr. Sampath Indigokumara stated that normal activities will be carried out at the hospital from tomorrow. Visitors are restricted from entering the hospital premises, and hospital officials urge visitors to adhere to proper hygiene procedures.
17 COVID-19 cases identified in Ovitigala, Mathugama.
It has been confirmed that 17 individuals, including 5 monks, at a temple in Ovitigala, Mathugama, have tested positive for COVID-19. The group of 17 who tested positive for the virus had come into contact with a group of pilgrims who had been infected with the virus. Kalutara District Administrative Public Health Inspector Samangi Ganage stated that PCR inspections have been increased and travel restrictions have also been tightened. He said that 43 COVID-19 infections have been identified in the district and more than 2,000 families have been subjected to quarantine.
Meanwhile, Commander of Sri Lanka Army Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva said that 3 villages under the purview of the Mathugama Divisional Secretariat have been isolated after COVID-19 cases were reported from those areas. The villages of Ovitigala, Badugama and New Badugama have been isolated like this.
Meanwhile, police say that the quarantine curfew imposed in 19 police jurisdictions in the Gampaha district will be in effect until further notice. The Sri Lanka police request the people to adhere to health regulations, remain indoors and assist the authorities to curb the COVID-19 situation in the country. Commander of the Sri Lanka Army and the head of the Presidential Task Force to combat COVID-19, Lieutenant General Shavendra Silva said that people residing in areas where quarantine curfew is currently in effect will be given another chance to purchase essential goods. He said that the opportunity will be granted either tomorrow or the day after, and adding further, he said that steps will be taken to make sure that there will be no shortage of essential goods. The Ministry of Finance says poverty-stricken families residing in areas where quarantine curfew is in effect will be given a concession of 5,000 rupees from tomorrow onwards. According to the Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, S.R. Artigala, 400 million rupees has been allocated for this task. This concession will be provided following the request made to the Ministry of Finance by the Gampaha District Secretary Sunil Jayalat on the 14th of this month.
Innovation is seeing what everyone has seen but thinking what no one has seen. Sadev Fernando, student from Balangoda, has made that saying a reality.
Sadev Fernando, who is a grade 5 student at the Ananda Maitri National School in Balangoda, is a talented inventor. This is the new creation of Sadev, who is spending his time at home. This invention provides the services of checking your temperature and washing your hands.
ශරීරෝෂ්ණත්ව පරීක්ෂා කිරීම පැමිණ පුද්ගලයා මෙම ස්ථානට පැමිණ ඔහුගේ නල්ල ෆෝ ටෙස්ටිං ස්ථානයේ ලං කළ විට මෙම සෙන්සර් එකෙන් ඔහුගේ උණ පරීක්ෂා කරගෙන ඔහු නිරෝගී පුද්ගලයන් නම් කොළපාට බල්බය දැල්වෙනවා. මම මෙහිදී උණ රෝගයක් වෙනුවට මදුනුසුම සහිත අයනයක් පාවිච්චි කරනවා. මෙම මදුනුසුම සහිත අයන එක මෙම සෙන්සර් එක ලං කළ විට මෙම සෙන්සර් එකෙන් ඔහුගේ උණ පරීක්ෂා කරගෙන ඔහු උණ රෝගීව හඳුනාගෙන මෙතන තියෙන රතු පාට බල්බය මෙතන තියෙන ඉලාමකට වදිනවා. මෙම ස්ථානයේ ශරීරෝෂ්ණත්ව පරීක්ෂා නොකර මෙම දොරින් ඇතුළු මෙතන තියෙන ලේසියේ ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙලා මෙතන තියෙන warning ඉලාමක වැදෙනවා.
Sadev is gearing up for his next creation, a drone equipped with a camera. Children such as Sadev, who are enthusiastic and devoted towards new innovations that help mankind, are indeed an invaluable example for all of us.
The weekly fair in Karagampitiya, Dehiwala was temporarily suspended earlier this morning. As notice of the suspension was suddenly announced this morning, vendors there were severely inconvenienced.
The cancellation of the weekly fair at Karagampitiya, Dehiwala was announced this morning by the Dehiwala police. Vendors who come for the weekly fair from various districts across the island expressed the following views.
සාම දුරේ ඉඳලා ඇඹිලිපිටිය සූර්යාව ඉඳලා එන්නේ. අපි ඉතින් අවුරුදු ගාණක් කියන්නේ අපි ණය වෙලා බඩු ගෙනල්ලා පොලියට සල්ලි අරගෙන බඩු ගෙනල්ලා ඉවරලා ඉතින් මේව දාලා යන්න බෑ. අපි කැමති මාත්‍ය ඕන සෞඛ්‍ය ආරක්ෂිත අපිත් ග්ලව්ස් දාගෙන මාස්ක් දාගෙන තමයි අපිත් මේ අඳුරගන්නේ. අපිත් තට්ටුව තියලා තියෙන මීටරයක් දුලින් මේ මිනිස්සු ඇවිල්ලා බඩු ගන්න. ඉතින් අර සිල්ලර කඩ ඔක්කොම ඕපන් කරන්න පුළුවන්. අපේ පොළ විතරයි අපි සාමාන්‍ය මිනිස්සු අපි කරන පොළ විතරයි තහනම් කරන්නේ.
අද මෙතනට බඩු ගෙනාවට පස්සේ අපිට කියනවා තහනම් කළා මේ විදිය හෙට උදේ අද රෑ 2 වෙනකොට අයින් කරන්න කියලා. මාධ්‍යයෙන් නෙවෙයි මේ පොලිසියෙන් ඇවිල්ලා කියන්නේ සර්. සෑම දිනෙකම මේ ඉන්න සියලු දෙනාම ණය වෙලා බඩු ගේන්නේ. හෙට උදේට ගෙදරට යන්න විදියක් නැහැ.
දැන් මෙහාට එනකොට දැන් මෙහි ඇවිල්ලා එකපාරටම පොළ නවත්තන්නේ කොට අපිට කරන්න දෙයක් නැහැ. අපි බඩු හදන් ඇවිල්ලානේ. අද නීතියක් දාලා වක මුකුත් නෙවෙයි.
According to our correspondent, officers of the Devolution police removed all vendors from the premises. The Devolution police said that these measures were taken to curb the spread of the COVID-19 virus.
The 20th Amendment will be debated in Parliament for 72 hours. There is less than 48 hours for the special determination of the Supreme Court regarding the 20th Amendment to be tabled in Parliament. Is the 20th Amendment the need of the hour? The debate is not yet over. Political ideologies of the ruling and the opposition parties were expressed at a media briefing convened by the priest's voice at the Abhairame temple today.
අපි ආණ්ඩුවක් පත් කරගත්ත බව ඇත්තයි සත්‍යයි සැබෑයි.
It is true that we elected a government, but firstly we are saddened by the fact that this government has forgotten that we even exist. We would like to inform these rulers that the power of the Mahasangha has not depleted. We would like to urge the President not to move forward with the 20th Amendment. If you are continuing with the 20th Amendment, do so with the approval of the Mahasangha. Do not move forward arbitrarily. If you do so, we will never approve this amendment. If you want to bring the 20th Amendment, you must first fix the flaws in the amendment. Throw away the amendments that cannot be agreed upon. If the rulers are planning to betray the Mahasangha, to corner the Mahasangha and to disregard the advice of the Mahasangha, I would like to stress that the Mahasangha is ready to respond to all of this. Do not think that we want to topple the government or change it. We are fighting to protect the government that we elected. We need to point out their flaws. If the government is unwilling to accept these, it is only then that the Mahasangha would take the next step.
මහාසංඝරත්නයේ දෙවෙනි පියවර ගන්න සූදානම් වන්නේ.
මේ විශ්ව පිළිබඳව අද උදේ
The Honorable President had sent a group of lawyers to my temple at 9:30 this morning to speak about the 20th Amendment. They spoke to me for about 1.5 hours. They said that they cannot change anything in the 20th Amendment. Venerable Theras are not going to change this. The Theras presented their proposals to the lawyers. We believe that the President would discuss these matters with those lawyers and get back to us. Our intention is to amend the 20th Amendment, if not postpone all of this. What is the hurry? Even after securing a 2/3 majority in Parliament, we are not of the opinion that independent commissions are bad. But it is the responsibility of this government to appoint suitable people to these commissions. We did not speak of these in the past. Now they have begun to walk all over us. We cannot allow this to happen. The powers that are needed can be taken, but the unwanted consolidation of powers in the amendment must be removed. We do not have any other intentions. All of these political parties are also a big headache these days. They are trying to meet us thinking that everything is going their way. No, that is not the case. No one can claim ownership over the fruits of our struggle. We are the ones who are behind the struggle, and we are the ones who own the fruits of it.
අපි ගහන පොළුවල ගෙඩි එකෙකුටවත් අහුලන්න බෑ. අපිම අහුලනවා ඒවා. අපිම ගහනවා. අපිම අහුල ගන්නවා. වෙන කාටවත් අහුලන්න ලේස්ති වෙන්න එපා. ඒක දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එහෙමනම් අපිම වැඩපිළිවෙල සකස් කරන් එන්න.
The government is going to bring in a new constitution, aren't they? Why don't they include all of these in the new constitution and present it? What is the hurry?
තොටු පොළවල් නැතුව ඉන්නකොට ආණ්ඩුවම තොටු පොළවල් කපලා දෙනවා. ඒවා කපන්න එපා. එතකොට අපිට බහින්න වෙනවා.
A letter highlighting the problems of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution was handed over to the Mahanayaka Theras of the Malwatu and Askiri chapter by the representatives of the National Trade Union Front.
We kindly requested the Mahanayaka Theros to intervene on this matter. Many acts, including the Right to Information Act, are cancelled by this. Moreover, through this audit, the independence of the court is heavily interfered. The president gets the authority to pass any act within 24 hours. Through its dictatorial nature, the president can sign the MCC and Singapore agreements. This causes damage to the people, economy and the politics of this country. The brother of the president is the Prime Minister, and the members of the family hold different ministerial portfolios and posts. Against such a backdrop, why must he be given an enormous amount of power? It has been a few months since the election. Why such a hurry? As a National Trade Union Front, we would like to say that it is better to take time and draft an appropriate constitution to the country and present it.
Sahasika Viruwa Paradamu National Organization organized a press conference in Colombo today and raised its objections against the 20th Amendment. In a decent world where human rights are protected, when one spouse gets a citizenship, his or her partner will also be given the citizenship. According to the constitutional amendment, my request to any person who wants to come to Parliament, who wants to become the head of a company, must revoke his or her partner's citizenship. That is because a person has the ability to go to the country where his or her spouse is a citizen of and get the citizenship. So there is no use of saying that I don't have a citizenship pointlessly. If someone's spouse has a citizenship, that person can get a citizenship from a foreign country. They are trying to cancel audits. It's simple. Anyone can comprehend that. Do you honestly think that the 20th Amendment is being brought forward to develop the country? The question is, who and what gets developed? This is extremely dangerous. Any sensible person would oppose this. We believe that there are sensible MPs in Parliament. We would like to make it clear that if that is not the case, those MPs who go in favour of this would get the bullet first. Moreover, by now it has been decided to sell off all the economic strategic locations in the country. You can clearly see that this country is gradually turning into a failed state.
තමුන්නා ඔබවහන්සේලාගේ සිවුරාස්සේ බංකර් හදන්න ලෑස්ති වෙන කාලේ වැඩි ඈතක නෑ. ඒ බංකර් හදන්න සිවුරාස්සේ ඉඩ නැති උතුයි කියලා තමයි අපි තමුන්නාන්සේලාගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටින්නේ.
The 20th Amendment to the Constitution is due to be tabled on the Parliament on 21st of October. We noticed that Vasudeva, Vimal Veeravangsha, Vidura Vikramanayaka and Vijaydas Rajapaksa have commented on the anti-democratic clauses and anti-democratic programs. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has set up a committee. This report was not presented to us nor the Cabinet. Are they going to do right by the general public by voting properly without screaming like chickens during committee meetings? Everyone is waiting to see if these parliamentarians are willing to stand with the people or if they will cover behind the guise of patriotism and vote in favor of this amendment because of their greed for ministerial portfolios. We are waiting to see if those who have expressed their views on behalf of the public will come forward in the media and abide by those views when it comes to the time to vote.
Convening a media briefing today, the State Audit Inspection Services Association expressed its views on the problematic situation that has arisen regarding the state audit powers under the 20th Amendment.
The State Audit Inspection Services Association today questioned the objective of the 20th Amendment's proposal to delegate the audit of state-owned enterprises to private auditing firms.
All government departments come under a particular ministry. The exclusion of these ministries, the Presidential Secretariat and the Prime Minister's Office and the commissions under the Article 41 of the Constitution is equivalent to excluding 70% of state revenue from the purview of the Parliament and the Auditor General. This is a question regarding the people's mandate. Under the 20th Amendment, about 150 state institutions will be audited by private firms. At present, Sri Lankan Airlines is being audited by a private audit firm. We pay 6.2 million rupees as audit fees every year. Let's assume we have to pay 50 million rupees for each institution as audit fees. In that case, for 150 institutions, we have to pay about 750 million rupees. It will be an outflow of 750 million rupees to the private sector. We have our suspicions as to whether the owners of these private firms who came forward through Viatmaga have a hand in this decision and whether these institutions were removed from the Auditor General's purview to fulfill their agendas. We made several requests to discuss this matter with the President, Prime Minister and the Minister of Justice. But we have not been given any opportunity to discuss this with anyone as yet. There is no law in this country that hinders development. The only factors that hinder development is inefficiency, corruption and fraud.
Sri Lanka's geopolitics.
Is US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo scheduled to visit Sri Lanka? There have been conflicting reports on whether or not the US State Secretary will travel to Sri Lanka shortly after a high-level Chinese delegation paid a visit to the island. The Sunday Morning Today reported that the government has confirmed that US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo would be making a brief visit to Sri Lanka following an official and a lengthier visit to New Delhi, India. The Sunday Morning quoted the Foreign Minister Dinesh Gunawardena saying, quote, "He will be coming to New Delhi and then to Colombo. It will be a short visit of a few hours," unquote. The report also quotes the minister saying, quote, "He will meet President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and officials of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs," unquote. However, when Newsfirst queried the spokesperson of the US Embassy in Colombo, Nancy Van Horn, she said, quote, "No official announcement has been made, but we would certainly alert you should a visit be announced," end quote.
Meanwhile, preparations are underway for a meeting between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Tamil National Alliance. According to the leader of the Tamil National Alliance, R. Sambandhan, a request has been made from India for a meeting with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Upon inquiring, R. Sambandhan stated that the Indian Prime Minister has given orders to the relevant authorities to make the necessary arrangements for the event. A meeting was held on the 21st of August between the Indian High Commissioner to Sri Lanka and the TNA. A video discussion was also held between Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Modi on the 26th of September. During this discussion, the Indian Prime Minister made the request to implement the 13th Amendment fully.
Attorney at Law Vanati Srinivasan, Vice President of the Bharatiya Janata Party in Tamil Nadu, says that India is keeping a close watch on the Chinese activities taking place in Sri Lanka and the pro-Chinese activities of the Sri Lankan government. She made these remarks during an interview with the Veerakesari weekend newspaper. Srinivasan points out that the arrival of a high-level Chinese delegation to Sri Lanka following discussions between the Prime Ministers of India and Sri Lanka confirms that the Rajapaksa government is beginning to work closely with China. She also said that China was violating the North Indian border and was working closely with Sri Lanka. The Bharatiya Janata Party representative said that there is a high possibility that the intense pressure from the Indian central government on the Indo-Lanka Accord and the settlement of ethnic issues would further push Sri Lanka towards a pro-Chinese stance. She added that the Indian government should focus on China's investment in the south of Sri Lanka and the role of Tamil representatives in the Sri Lankan government. Meanwhile, the Tamil Nadu Vice President of the Bharatiya Janata Party said Central Government Minister Nitin Gadkari has initiated plans to construct a bridge between Rameshwaram in Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka. During the interview, the Vice President further said that she has expedited the establishment of a boat service between Karaikal and Kankasanture. The Vice President has also made remarks about flights between Palali and India.
Meanwhile, views of the JVP regarding foreign influence over Sri Lanka were expressed at a press briefing.
ඒ වගේම මේ චීන දූත පිරිස ඇවිල්ලා ජනාධිපති මුණ ගැහිලා අගමැති මුණ ගැහිලා ආපහු චීනට ගිය.
We saw India responding soon as the Chinese delegation left after meeting the president. India has appointed a new consul to 4 districts in the south, which seems as if India is appointing ministers here. Most of the Chinese property in Sri Lanka are located in the south. The Hambantota port is in the south. A sudden meeting was held between the Indian High Commissioner and the Prime Minister. And now talks are happening regarding a tour of the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to India at the end of this month. During the visit, he is due to arrive in Sri Lanka as well. The Chinese are arriving day after day. Then India replies. The US Secretary of State will also come. With these, we can clearly see that this country is becoming a backyard of India, the United States and China. Tilvin Silva also stated that Sri Lanka is on its way of falling into a debt trap.
මේ බලවතුන්ට යට වෙන්න මේ ආණ්ඩුවට සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙන වෙන කිසිවක් නිසා නෙවෙයි ලංකාව.
Because the country is in so much debt, the leaders have no option but to abide by these superpowers. It is in debt worth 13,000 million rupees. The only solution the government of Sri Lanka has is to take more loans. The remaining option is to give away the land natural resources of the nation as collateral. We can see it happening right now.
Why is the US Secretary of State visiting Sri Lanka? Tilvin Silva elaborated on this matter.
The signing of the SOFA agreement has been postponed right now. We think that amidst the present situation, Sri Lanka could be turned into a state where we will have to sign the SOFA agreement. What is the MCC agreement? We are under the impression that the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is coming in order to convince Sri Lanka to sign the MCC agreement. There is a risk of the Colombo port jetty falling into the hands of India. There is a risk of our oil tanks and oil tanks in Trincomalee to be rented to India. There is another risk of the lands close to the Hambantota port being owned by China in the near future.
He further explained the reason behind the sudden urge to bring in the 20th Amendment.
What is Gotabaya Rajapaksa trying to do with the 20th? He is trying to get hold of the power so that he can abide by China, so that he can give whatever India wants, even if the people or the parliament opposes it, so that he can do whatever America wants. He is trying to get a hold of the power so that he can give whatever China and America demands, despite the objections made by the people. These preparations of a dictatorship are being made not to develop the country, but to avoid objections made by the people and the parliament when it comes to borrowing foreign loans and signing agreements. On one hand, we are providing key locations of our country to China. The government has begun the process of indirectly handing over the Southern Expressway to China. The government will make plans to hand over many of these key areas to China to come out of that situation that we are currently in. There are plans to hand over more to America through the MCC. When the government doesn't have an economic program and every decision is made on a political basis, the country has to face such situations.
This is ours. Sri Lanka's exclusive economic zone. $517,000 square kilometers of beautiful open ocean. Our greatest resource. 8 times our landmass. This is the Sea of Sri Lanka.
Welcome back to the news. The Attorney General instructed the Acting Inspector General of Police to arrest parliamentarian Rishad Badiuddin on the 13th of this month. However, 5 days have gone by, but no arrests have been made as of yet. Various views have been expressed regarding this from both ruling and opposition factions in the political arena. The All Ceylon Makkal Congress, led by Rishad Badiuddin, convened a media briefing today.
Chairman of the National Election Commission said that there is no problem with purchasing vehicles if the voters are providing the money. But this money has been transferred from one public institution to another, and that money has been given to the ministry. No one has suffered losses from this. I do not know whether the AG is acting according to his own whims and fancies or being controlled by the government. The AG has given instructions at 2 occasions. He ordered the immediate arrest of Ravi Karunanayake. He was in hiding for a few days. Then he went to court. Not so long after that, there was a massive controversy revolving around the mayor of Kurunegala. The Court of Appeal very clearly condemned the action of the AG in that particular incident. This is the 3rd incident. Now Rishad Badiuddin has resorted to courts because of these false instructions given by the AG, with the belief that he will get the same opportunity as Ravi Karunanayake, the mayor of Kurunegala, and even Rajit Sinaratna received from court. He opted to stay away from the spotlight for a while. He will be present before the public after the court verdict on the 20th. I cannot be responsible for the fact that police cannot find him.
මම එක වග කියන්න ඕනේ මම ඒක මගේ මට කියන්න බෑ සම්බන්ධ.
මේ ඉසාපදුරේ මහතාව අත්අඩංගුවට ගැනීම පිටිපස්සේ ආණ්ඩුවට 20 වෙනි ව්‍යවස්ථා සංශෝධනය සඳහා බලින් උත්සාහය ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා මේක සිදු කරනවා කියන කතාව කියනවා.
මම හිතනවා එහෙම අවශ්‍යතාවයක් අධික.
I do not think that the government has a need like that.
මේ රජයේ මේ වගේ දෙයක් කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ.
කොහොමද දැන් මේ විශේෂ සංශෝධනයට සහාය දෙනවද නැත්නම්
We have not yet reached a decision regarding that. Whatever the decision is, he will act on the instructions given to him by the attorneys representing him after the 20th.
ලංකාවේ ඉන්න කේෂුවර්
මම නම් කියන්නේ හදට ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා කියලා.
It was I from the Sinhala Rave organization who intervened and filed this complaint with the Inspector General of Police on the 26th of November in 2019. After a year since the complaint was filed, I believe with the intervention of the Attorney General, an order was issued for the immediate arrest of Rishad Badiuddin. But the police or the CID cannot arrest Rishad Badiuddin. We must make it clear that there is a force in the government that is providing protection to Rishad Badiuddin. So the government is making a big mistake. We can see that a government politician has got involved in this. This politician must produce Rishad Badiuddin immediately.
Rishad Badiuddin කියන්නේ විශ්වකර්මයෙක් නෙවෙයි.
Rishad Badiuddin is not a miraculous being. We have a president who has control over the country. He was brought into power with a 2/3 majority. Then why is the law not being enforced? Is this democracy? Law is enforced on ordinary citizens, but people in a position of power are above the law. The big fish get away, the small ones get caught. The people of this country do not want that. Why can't Rishad Badiuddin be arrested today? Who released him? These are issues. Rishad Badiuddin must be arrested immediately and the law must be enforced. If not, the country will be destroyed even more.
මේ රට විනාශ වී යනවා ඇති.
We don't expect any support from parliamentarian Rishad Badiuddin. We don't need it. We have a 2/3 majority. Rishad Badiuddin had spoken with Sajid Premadasa, the leader of the alliance he contested under. We would like to clearly state that Sajid Premadasa would know where Rishad Badiuddin is. So we would like to ask Sajid Premadasa to hand over Rishad Badiuddin to the police as soon as possible.
පොලිසියට බාර දෙන්න කියන එක තමයි අපිට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ.
ඒක මහා මෝඩ ප්‍රශ්නයක්නේ. ආණ්ඩුව හොයනවද නැද්ද කියන එක ආණ්ඩුවේ වැඩක්. නමුත් මගේ ගෙදර ඉන්නවයි කියන එක මහා මෝඩ ප්‍රශ්නයක්.
This was the opposition leader's response to a question raised when he was visiting the chief prelate of the Amarapura sect, Most Venerable Kotugoda Dhammavasa Thera, at the Dharmapala Rama Viharaya in Mount Lavinia. I said that 20,000 rupees should be given, but the people said no to that. I asked the government to provide concessions as soon as possible without fooling the people. The government has a different plan these days. That is the 20th Amendment. They are pursuing that without looking into the spread of the coronavirus in the country. The 19th Amendment has what is required for a proper government. We have therefore begun the 19+ movement.
Over to one of the top stories today. Vikari, a Sri Lankan short film directed by Sandum Seneviratne, won Best Short Film at the Screenfest Horror Film Festival 2020.
The Screamfest Horror Film Festival was held in Los Angeles, USA. Vikari was the first Sri Lankan film to be screened at the festival, starring Ashan Dias, Bimsara Premaratne and British actor Richard D. Roberts. Produced as a science fiction short film, the story draws attention towards children born with a similar type of deformity around the world and the fears that result from it.
Screenfest Horror Film Festival is one of the largest genre festivals in the world. It's also the longest running and the biggest horror festival in the US. So I consider this not just an honor for us, but for Sri Lanka as well, because this was the first Sri Lankan film that Screenfest has screened. So to win the award is an incredible honor for us, and all credit goes out to all my collaborators. Vikari will be released online in December, and we hope to one day make it into a feature film.
Every once in a while, a great nation is tested by a great evil. Now, some nations fall, and others, they just thrive in the face of such adversity. Now, I believe Mother Lanka is facing such a transformative event right now. Everything depends on how we act now.
Yet more cases of babies being born with an unusual defect.
Everything depends on what we do now.
When I first walked into that room and saw one, made my blood run cold.
And with that, it's a wrap of Primetime News for today. I'm Tharushakumar Singha, along with our sign language interpreter for today, Tarka Gabriel. Stay safe, stay indoors as much as possible, but stay close to News First. For that, just simply log on to our website, that is www.newsfirst.lk. Good night and take care.